So there I was, floating around in the most prestigious space station in the galaxy, watching what could only be described as the universe's biggest collection of alien egos gathered in one place. The galactic council chambers looked like someone had thrown a cosmic costume party and forgotten to mention the theme. You had your standard tentacle beings, your crystalline rock people, your floating gas clouds with attitude problems, and of course the inevitable species that looked like they'd been designed by a committee of edgy teenagers. But the real star of this show was Vexthera, the council's premier telepathic interrogator. Picture this: 8 feet tall, skin like polished obsidian, 4 arms that moved with the kind of fluid grace that made you think she practiced synchronized swimming in her spare time, and eyes that glowed with the confidence of someone who had never met a mind she couldn't crack like a walnut. Vexthera was basically the Michael Jordan of brain invasion. For the past 3 centuries, she had been the go-to gal whenever the council needed to extract information from unwilling subjects. Political dissidents, space pirates, tax evaders, that one guy who kept parking his ship in the handicapped spot without a permit. They all folded like origami in a hurricane the moment she made mental contact. Her success rate was perfect. Not 99%, not 99.9%, 100%. Because apparently in a galaxy full of advanced civilizations, nobody had figured out how to properly secure their thoughts against a determined telepathic intruder. Which brings us to today's entertainment. Earth had finally managed to crawl out of its technological diapers long enough to send their first official diplomatic mission to the stars. The Council, being the welcoming bunch they were, had decided that the best way to greet humanity was to immediately test their mental defenses. You know, just to see what they were working with. Nothing says friendly first contact like an impromptu brain scan. The human representative was one Ambassador Jake Martinez, a guy who looked like he had been specifically designed to be as aggressively average as possible. Medium height, medium build, the kind of face you would forget 5 seconds after meeting him at a grocery store. He wore a navy blue suit that probably came from the diplomatic equivalent of a bargain bin, and he had this expression of barely contained excitement, like a kid who just found out he was going to Disneyland but was trying really hard to act professional about it. Poor Jake had no idea what he was walking into. The council chambers were buzzing with the kind of anticipation you usually see right before someone gets publicly humiliated on live television. Vexthera approached her workstation with the casual confidence of someone about to perform a routine maintenance check. After all, what could possibly be challenging about reading the mind of a species that had only recently figured out how to leave their own planet without exploding? Vexthera placed one of her 4 hands on Jake's shoulder with all the ceremony of someone checking their mail. She closed her glowing eyes, activated her telepathic abilities, and prepared to dive into what she expected would be a refreshingly simple mind. You know, basic thoughts about food, reproduction, maybe some primitive territorial instincts. The mental equivalent of a children's picture book. What she got instead was like trying to drink from a fire hose, filled with caffeinated chaos. The first thing that hit her was Jake's immediate panic about whether he had remembered to turn off his hotel room's air conditioning before leaving for the meeting. This was immediately followed by a detailed mental review of his breakfast choices, a lingering anxiety about whether his tie was straight, and a sudden realization that he had absolutely no idea how to pronounce half the alien names he was supposed to be memorizing. But wait, there was more. So much more. Jake's mind was simultaneously running a complex analysis of the political implications of this first contact scenario, while also wondering if the weird blue alien in the corner was judging his posture. He was calculating the potential economic benefits of interstellar trade agreements while questioning whether his deodorant was still working after the stress of the morning. And somehow, through all of this mental noise, Jake was maintaining a perfectly pleasant conversation with the council members about Earth's weather patterns. His mouth was saying things like, "Yes, our seasonal variations create diverse agricultural opportunities," while his brain was screaming, "Did I remember to pay my parking meter? What if I get a ticket? What if they tow my car? Do I even need my car anymore if I'm going to be doing space diplomacy?" Vexthera tried to focus, to find the main thread of his consciousness, but it was like trying to follow a single conversation at a party where everyone was talking at maximum volume about completely different topics. Jake's mind was processing the architectural aesthetics of the space station while simultaneously reviewing every embarrassing thing he had ever said to a woman, while also running through a mental grocery list, while also composing what he thought was a very clever response to the next question he anticipated being asked. The worst part was that none of these thoughts seemed to interfere with each other. They were all running in parallel, like the universe's most chaotic computer operating system. Jake was experiencing genuine existential dread about humanity's place in the cosmic order while also feeling weirdly proud that he had managed to get dressed without staining his shirt that morning. Vexthara's orderly, disciplined mind began to feel like it was trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces were the same color and also possibly from different puzzles entirely. She had never encountered a consciousness that could simultaneously hold deep philosophical thoughts, random pop culture references, financial anxieties, and a detailed internal debate about whether the meeting room's lighting was flattering to his complexion. And Jake just kept talking, completely oblivious to the mental hurricane he was putting her through. That's when things got really interesting. See, Vexthara made the critical mistake of trying to dig deeper, thinking she could find some kind of organizational structure in Jake's mind, some kind of filing system, maybe a nice orderly hierarchy of thoughts arranged by importance or relevance. Instead, she stumbled face first into Jake's memory of last weekend, when he had attempted to assemble a bookshelf from IKEA. Now, for those of you who haven't experienced the unique psychological torture that is Swedish furniture assembly, imagine trying to solve a three-dimensional puzzle designed by someone who clearly has a grudge against the concept of logical instruction. Jake's memory wasn't just replaying the events. Oh no, it was a full sensory experience complete with the mounting frustration, the growing certainty that he was missing crucial pieces, and the slow descent into madness that comes with realizing that the little cartoon man in the instruction manual was definitely mocking him. But here's where it gets really fun. While Vexthara was trapped in this furniture assembly nightmare, Jake's present moment consciousness was simultaneously experiencing a completely separate anxiety spiral about whether he should call his mother more often. Not just whether he should call her, but the complex emotional mathematics of family obligation, the guilt about not calling last Sunday, the preemptive stress about what she might want to discuss, and the weird shame about being a grown man who still felt like he needed his mom's approval for major life decisions. These two thought streams were running in parallel, creating a feedback loop that was making Vexthara's four eyes water. She was experiencing the visceral frustration of trying to insert tab A into slot B, while simultaneously feeling guilty about missing Mother's Day 2 years ago. The worst part was that both of these mental experiences felt equally urgent and important to Jake's psyche. But wait, there was more. Because Jake's mind apparently had unlimited bandwidth for psychological chaos. Layer 3 was his ongoing internal debate about whether he had made the right career choice. This wasn't just simple job anxiety, this was a full-scale existential crisis complete with alternate timeline analysis. Jake was simultaneously living through his current reality, while also exploring detailed fantasies about what his life would have been like if he had become a marine biologist instead of a diplomat. He was wondering if fish were judging him for his life choices, while also panicking about whether aliens might be judging him for his species' environmental track record. Vexthara realized she was no longer just reading Jake's mind, she was experiencing it. The telepathic connection had become a two-way street, and now she was feeling the full weight of human emotional complexity. She was experiencing guilt about things she had never done, anxiety about problems that didn't exist, and a strange, inexplicable pride about parallel parking that one time in downtown Sacramento. The other council members were starting to notice that something was wrong. Vexthara's usually serene expression had been replaced by a look of growing horror, like someone who had just realized they were trapped in an elevator with a broken speaker system playing elevator music on infinite loop. She tried to pull back, to break the connection, but Jake's mind was like mental quicksand. The harder she struggled to escape, the deeper she sank into the beautiful, chaotic mess that was human consciousness. And that's when Vexthara discovered the truly terrifying thing about human minds. They don't actually know what they're thinking most of the time. But somehow they still manage to function like a competent civilization. Jake was having a complete mental breakdown about whether cereal counted as soup. Not just a passing thought, mind you. This was a full philosophical investigation involving the definition of soup, the role of temperature in food classification, the cultural implications of breakfast categorization, and a detailed analysis of whether the spoon-to-liquid ratio was the determining factor in culinary taxonomy. And while this earth-shattering cereal debate was raging in one corner of his mind, another part was simultaneously developing what he considered to be a brilliant strategy for humanity's defense against potential alien invasion. Not that he thought the current aliens were hostile, but better safe than sorry. His plan involved a complex combination of guerrilla warfare tactics, psychological operations, and something he kept referring to as the element of surprise through sheer unpredictability. The really disturbing part was that both of these thought processes seemed equally important to him. The cereal question and humanity's survival were being given the same mental resources and emotional investment. Vexthara's orderly alien consciousness was trying to process this contradiction and failing spectacularly. In her species, thoughts were logical, linear, purposeful. You thought about important things with appropriate priority levels. You didn't waste cognitive resources on breakfast philosophy while simultaneously planning interstellar warfare. But Jake's mind was operating on a completely different paradigm. He was capable of holding mutually exclusive ideas without any apparent distress. He could be deeply worried about humanity's future while also being irrationally confident in their abilities. He could feel profoundly grateful for this opportunity to represent his species while also wondering if he was completely unqualified for the job. He could experience crushing self-doubt and unreasonable optimism at exactly the same time. And somehow, out of this mental chaos, he was still managing to give coherent responses to the Council's questions. His mouth was saying things like, "Earth's technological development has been rapid but sustainable," while his brain was analyzing whether the weird tentacle aliens' movements reminded him of his high school cafeteria's spaghetti. Vexthera realized she was witnessing humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage. It wasn't their tool use, their adaptability, or their pack-hunting instincts. It was their ability to function normally while experiencing complete cognitive chaos. They had turned mental disorder into a superpower. Other species developed logic, reason, and clear thinking to survive. Humans had apparently decided that sanity was optional and chaos was a feature, not a bug. They could make critical decisions while their minds were simultaneously focused on 17 different problems, 12 random memories, and at least 3 completely hypothetical scenarios. The telepathic feedback was getting stronger. Vexthera could feel her own mind starting to fragment as it tried to accommodate Jake's mental architecture. She was beginning to wonder if she had left her meditation crystals charging properly, while also feeling inexplicably anxious about a test she had never taken for a class she had never attended. Jake's consciousness was infectious. It was spreading through the telepathic link like a virus, converting her orderly thoughts into a chaotic symphony of random concerns, forgotten obligations, and philosophical questions about whether hot dogs were technically sandwiches. That's when Jake's mind took a hard left turn into territory that broke Vexthera completely. One moment he was mentally reviewing the political ramifications of interstellar trade agreements, and the next moment he was having a full-scale existential crisis about whether his response to "How are you doing?" that morning had been appropriately enthusiastic. Not just whether it was polite, but whether the specific tone, timing, and facial expression had conveyed the right level of professional friendliness without seeming fake or overeager. He was replaying the entire interaction in slow motion, analyzing every syllable, every micro-expression, every possible interpretation of his words. He was wondering if saying, "Good, thanks, how about you," was too generic. Or if "Great, thanks for asking," would have been too much, or if he should have added more specific details about why he was doing well, or if asking about their day in return was genuine interest, or just social obligation. And this wasn't just a quick moment of social anxiety. This was a comprehensive post-interaction analysis that would have impressed a team of behavioral psychologists. Jake was running through alternate scenarios, calculating probability matrices of how his response might have been perceived, and somehow feeling simultaneously confident that he had handled it perfectly and absolutely certain that he had made a terrible first impression. Meanwhile, in another part of his brain, he was conducting a serious philosophical investigation into whether the aliens had good snacks. Not just idle curiosity, but a genuine concern about interstellar hospitality standards. He was wondering if offering to share human snacks would be culturally appropriate, whether alien digestive systems could handle Earth food, and whether bringing up snacks during a formal diplomatic meeting would be seen as unprofessional or endearingly human. Vexthera's mind, which had spent centuries functioning like a precision instrument, was now experiencing the full weight of human overthinking. She was feeling genuine anxiety about social interactions she had never had, wondering about snack protocols for species she had never met, and somehow experiencing both crushing self-doubt and irrational confidence about her telepathic abilities. The feedback loop was reaching critical mass. Jake's thoughts about whether cereal was soup had evolved into a full-scale analysis of breakfast culture across human civilization. He was considering the societal implications of morning meal traditions, the economic impact of cereal marketing, and whether the invention of breakfast cereal represented humanity's greatest achievement or its most embarrassing cultural export. That's when Vexthera made the mistake of trying to focus on just one of Jake's thoughts to regain her mental balance. She picked what seemed like a simple question: are hot dogs sandwiches? Big mistake. Huge. Jake's mind immediately launched into what could only be described as a doctoral thesis on sandwich philosophy. He was considering the structural integrity argument, the historical precedent of handheld foods, the cultural significance of bread-based meal delivery systems, and the legal implications of sandwich classification for tax purposes. Vexthera screamed. Not a dignified alien expression of distress, but a full-throated primal scream of cognitive overload. And in that moment of telepathic chaos, she accidentally broadcast Jake's entire mental stream to every member of the Galactic Council. Suddenly every being in the chamber was experiencing Jake's thoughts about whether they had good snacks, his anxiety about air conditioning, his philosophical concerns about breakfast food, and his surprisingly detailed invasion defense strategies all at the same time. The council chambers erupted into confused chaos as dozens of alien minds tried to process the beautiful disaster that was human consciousness. And then Vexthera passed out, her overloaded brain finally shutting down to protect itself from any more exposure to Jake's mental architecture. Jake finally noticed that something had happened when the 8-foot-tall telepathic interrogator collapsed onto the floor with a sound like someone dropping a bag of angry cats. The entire council chamber had gone silent, which was actually kind of impressive considering it had been buzzing with conversation just moments before. "Oh wow, is she okay?" Jake asked, his voice carrying that particular tone of concern that people use when they're not entirely sure if they should be worried or if this is just normal alien behavior. His mind was immediately spinning up its anxiety engine, wondering if he had somehow caused this, if he should offer to help, if touching an unconscious alien would be considered assault, and whether he should call for medical assistance or if aliens even had doctors. The crystalline council member who had been asking him about Earth's mineral resources was now staring at Jake with what could only be described as absolute terror. Its normally prismatic surface had gone completely opaque, like someone had switched off a light. "What?" It managed to whisper in a voice like grinding quartz. "What was that thing about the hot dogs?" Jake blinked, genuinely confused. "Hot dogs? I wasn't talking about hot dogs. Were we supposed to be talking about hot dogs? Is that like a diplomatic thing I missed in the briefing?" His mental gears were already spinning, wondering if there was some crucial cultural exchange involving Earth's processed meat products that he had somehow overlooked. The tentacle alien in the corner was making a sound like a broken air conditioner, which Jake was pretty sure wasn't a good sign. Several other council members were backing away from him like he was radioactive, their various appendages twitching in what appeared to be barely controlled panic. The cereal wheezed the gas cloud entity, its usual purple glow now flickering like a dying neon sign. The terrible questions about breakfast foods. How do you live with those thoughts? I mean, cereal is kind of a weird food when you think about it. Jake replied helpfully, completely missing the existential horror in the alien's voice. Like, we just pour milk on grain flakes and call it a meal. When you put it that way, it does sound kind of primitive. This caused several council members to make distressed noises that probably violated noise ordinance laws on most civilized planets. The head of the council, a dignified reptilian being who had maintained perfect composure throughout centuries of interstellar diplomacy, was now pressing all 6 of his hands against his temples like he was trying to prevent his brain from escaping through his ears. "Ambassador Martinez," he said very carefully, "we have decided to immediately approve humanity's application for full membership in the Galactic Council, with all the benefits and protections that entails. Please take this documentation and return to your ship at your earliest convenience." "Really? That's fantastic." Jake lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "I thought this was going to take months of negotiations. This is way easier than I expected. Should I call Earth? Do you need me to sign anything?" "Oh man, wait until I tell my mom about this." The mere mention of Jake's mother caused visible shuddering throughout the chamber. "No signatures necessary," the council head said quickly, practically shoving a datapad into Jake's hands. "Everything has been pre-approved. Expedited processing. Please go." Down on the floor, Vexthera was starting to stir, making small whimpering sounds that suggested she was having some kind of psychological episode. A medical team was hovering around her, but they seemed afraid to actually touch her, like she might be contagious. "Should I wait to see if she's okay?" Jake asked, because despite everything, he was actually a pretty decent guy who felt bad when people got hurt, even if he had no idea he was the one who had hurt them. "No," came the immediate chorus from approximately 15 different species, creating a harmony of terror that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so deeply disturbing. As Jake was escorted out of the chamber by what appeared to be the alien equivalent of security guards, he was already mentally composing his report back to Earth. He was proud of himself for successfully completing humanity's first diplomatic mission, even if he wasn't entirely sure what had happened with the mind reader lady. He was wondering if he should mention the fainting incident in his official report, or if that would make humanity look bad somehow. 3 months later, Vexthera was still in therapy, working through what her counselor delicately referred to as acute exposure to human cognitive patterns. She had developed a nervous tic where she would randomly wonder about breakfast food classifications, and she had to be sedated whenever anyone mentioned furniture assembly. The Galactic Council had issued a galaxy-wide memo classifying human minds as a Class 7 cognitive hazard, advising all telepathic species to avoid mental contact with humans, unless absolutely necessary and preferably while wearing appropriate psychic protection equipment. And Jake returned to Earth as a hero, completely oblivious to the fact that he had accidentally weaponized human consciousness and traumatized the galaxy's most elite telepathic interrogator. His biggest concern during the flight home was whether his expense report would be approved, and whether the airline food qualified as a legitimate meal or just elaborate snacks. The beautiful chaos of human consciousness had officially become humanity's greatest diplomatic asset, even if nobody on Earth realized it yet.